Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. It's the second week of December. We are less than 2 weeks away from Christmas for those of you who celebrate. I've got my holiday cheer jacket on in my red sequins as we count down the days until the end of 2023. We have been focusing on the holidays during this series. November, we packed with boundaries, veterans, homelessness, trans and non binary family members, loved ones with disabilities. Last week, we got into overextending, overgiving, overly accommodating others during the holidays. And today, we are going to be discussing caregiving and the holidays. So, this topic really hits home, I think, around this time of year because I'm at an age where some people are already caregiving for their parents. Some of us served as caregivers for parents that have transitioned. People have children. People may be taking care of spouses or siblings or extended family members. And the reality is that there are a lot of people who will be serving in some caregiving capacity over your lifetime. And caregiving can be so very loving and rewarding. It can also be very stressful for people. And I think a lot of times we struggle with all of the different emotions that come along with caregiving. We may feel good about being able to care for a loved one at home as opposed to putting them in a care facility. We might feel guilty when we have to transition our loved ones into care facilities because we recognize they need a higher level of care than we can provide. We're trying to balance all of the needs of their care recipients, but then also trying to balance your own needs as a caregiver. And so that can be really challenging for people to be able to navigate. And particularly as we talk about the holidays and caregiving, it can be very difficult to add some of the things that come along with the holiday season to an already full caseload of caregiving. What if your loved one that you're caregiving for is sick? Maybe they have had to go to the emergency room, or maybe they're in a rehab facility. Maybe they had a fall. The last Christmas that I spent with my mother, she ended up needing, that's when we found out her cancer had progressed to her liver. So she ended up needing to just be monitored constantly. She got to a point where she really wasn't eating, and I just didn't feel comfortable leaving her by herself. I was still working, and during that time, there wasn't telehealth for mental health providers, and so I was still having to go into the office, and so she needed a caregiver to come in. That year before that, she was in the hospital. Her femur snapped from the cancer eating through the bone. So there's just a lot of things that can happen during the holiday time. People can end up getting sick, right? Maybe you have a loved one who they get a urinary tract infection during the holiday season, or maybe their medication was changed and they're having some difficulty with medication. Blood pressure can spike during the holiday season, particularly as people may be bringing in different kinds of foods, or there may be different stressors that come along with the holidays as people may be coming into your space. Perhaps that's triggering for them to have these extra people coming into their space. Sometimes our loved ones can be very paranoid and very concerned about people being around, and so that can end up causing conflict. We may have family members that are at odds with each other. We may have family members who disagree about how you're caregiving for the loved one. And so when they come for the holidays, they may come and they may be critical, talking to you about how you're managing the house. Is it clean enough? What are you doing with this person's money? Why didn't you approve the different caregivers that you may have helping? Why aren't you having some caregivers help you? We want you to host and you want to scale back, right? So there could be all of these different things that could be possibly happening over the holidays on top of your caregiving responsibilities. So let's talk a little bit in general about caregiver stress. One of the things, I actually did my dissertation on caregivers, which I'm very thankful I did because that information came in really handy when it came time for me to be a caregiver. But one of the things that came out of that dissertation was that people tend to feel a tremendous amount of guilt when it comes to caregiving because we engage in the shoulds. I should be there. I should be the one taking care of them. I should have more patience. I should be more understanding. They don't want anybody in their house, so I shouldn't have anybody else in here to offer support and caregive for them. Nobody's going to take care of them the way that I can take care of them. You can't trust everybody. What if something happens and then I'm going to feel bad? What if I miss something? What if they have their last moments and I'm not there? I don't want to be in a position where they have to be going through this alone. They need somebody, at least a comforting face. And sometimes, regardless of the size of the family, there is typically one person that more of the caregiving responsibility tends to fall on. Now, whether that's by choice, this person chooses that they want to be the person that's in that role, or by force. So nobody else is stepping up, so I'm the one that steps up because I just don't feel like anybody else would be there. And so what ends up happening is that person then feels like they are carrying a lot of this responsibility for the family, or maybe you're an only child, or maybe you're a parent of a child that has a lot of needs, and so you're caregiving for them. Am I doing enough? Am I engaging them enough? And the reality is, we have guilt because sometimes the load feels very heavy. And it causes a stress, and we feel bad about that. We feel bad about, as a parent, caregiving for a child and getting frustrated about those caregiving responsibilities. It's not that we don't love this child, but it is that there are a lot of things that may go along with it, particularly if they have a lot of coexisting health conditions that come along. There could be a lot of doctor's appointments. There could be a lot of mental health issues that might be going on along with it. What if this person is nonverbal? What if this person has diapers and they need to be changed? What if this person can't feed themselves? What if this person needs to be turned over? Right now, I'm down in my back, and I'm finding myself not taking care of myself because I'm trying to make sure this person is taken care of. And then when I start feeling some resentment, because sometimes when you're in that caregiving role, that care recipient can have some personality changes. And so now they're talking to me in ways that aren't very nice. They're doing this thing where when they know you've got to go somewhere, or that you may be taking a vacation or just trying to get some moments away, they will have an incident so that you can't go, or their goal is to get you not to go. That's when you'll see a change in their behavior. And some of it is fear, right? Sometimes our care recipients are afraid. And so they're concerned about us leaving them, and concerned about what might happen while you're gone. But sometimes our care recipients are being manipulative, and they just don't want you to go anywhere because they want you to be there with them. And they recognize that when they do certain things, that changes your behavior, right? Because they don't have a lot of power over much else. And so here's an opportunity for them to have some of that control. And particularly when they're in positions where they tend to be a little bit more irritable, a little bit more ornery. Frankly, some would say just outright mean. Then they will say very ugly and nasty things to you in order to get that response, in order to get you to change that behavior. So a lot of these strong emotions are experienced because of the caregiving dynamic. Maybe there's not been a lot of change in the person, and so we feel so responsible for their functioning, their health, their affairs. So now I'm the person that has to make a decision about whether or not they go to the hospital. I'm the person that needs to make a decision about whether or not a procedure needs to be done. I'm the person that's being asked if there's an advance directive or if there's been any end of life planning. I'm the person that's responsible for the financial management. There might be an estate that I'm managing, and that's not just the cleaning and the cooking, but also like I'm managing the affairs of this property. And sometimes you're managing a property that no one is living in, or you're managing a property another family member is renting or living in while this loved one is staying with you. Um, it is also that sometimes we recognize that we just lose ourselves. And so that boundary piece, you all know that's one of my favorites. So we're losing ourselves in terms of now I don't have an identity outside of being a caregiver because this person has a high level of needs. And so I'm not actually engaging in anything other than being their caregiver, right? So particularly if I have a job that I'm working and then let's say you're keeping the person at home, you work from home, you have a caregiver there while you're working from home. But then that caregiver leaves around dinner time, and now you're responsible for taking care of this person through the night and into the next day. And so there isn't any separation in order for you to really be able to have some time away. Or you go to work, but as soon as you come home from work, you're going over to a hospital or you're going over to some type of respite care that might be utilized, or you're coming home and you're taking on that responsibility. And I think a lot of times we don't feel like we can do other things because, all right, so I've already been working and someone else has been here with you, or I'm the only person, again, in the family who is able to serve in this caregiving role or who is choosing to serve in this caregiving role. So I feel like I should be the one to make the sacrifices. You may be someone who is a person that I love very much. You could be a parent, so I feel like, well, hey, you did these things for me, or grandparent, you did these things for me, or you're my child. I feel responsible for you, so I feel like I should be the one who cancels plans, who doesn't really take that time to herself or himself, because I really feel like any other time that I have should be spent with you. I do think also at times because we haven't necessarily been in a position to get caregiver training, right? So, caregiver training, what does that entail? Understanding what it means to be a caregiver, uh, learning how to navigate insurance, learning how to navigate healthcare, understanding this person's needs as a care recipient, um, how you're going to need to be planning for the future, how you can respond when they're resistant to particular services that might be beneficial for them, and also just a common caregiving challenges that some of which we mentioned. There are other things, getting a person dressed, getting a person's hygiene completed. Again, if this person doesn't have mobility, then then I need to be thinking about, okay, well, how am I going to be able to take care of their task of daily living every day? Um, what if this person is not in a position to be able to help me at all? So I'm literally trying to figure out how to maneuver them, take care of them, wash their hair, um, change dressing. They've got bandages. They may have had procedures done. Maybe they need to have injections daily or blood check daily. They have medication that needs to be taken at particular times, right? And so being able to navigate some of those things, transportation. If a person is not mobile, how am I going to be able to get them to the places where they need to have appointments? So those are the kind of things that when we haven't had any kind of webinar or any training on caregiving, we may just not be prepared for them, and then it can be even more stressful. I definitely also think that there are just the nuances, the changes, right, over time in a person. Some people will be caregiving for 30 years, right? So maybe this is a person that has dementia. Maybe they live with that dementia for 3 decades. Maybe this is a child who has a chronic health condition where they're going to require constantly care for the rest of their lives. And so they're aging and growing, and their needs are changing over this time. You think about how much can change over the course of 30 years, right? And how much can change from this person being an infant or a child progressing to later childhood, or this person going from being able to be mobile to not being mobile, this person's vision changing over time, their hearing changing over time, their weight changing over time, and then what happens if they get swelling? I mean, bed sores, right? So there are all of these dynamics that could change over a course of time, not to mention their mental state, because we know that sometimes our care recipients deal with depression. They are dealing with some hopelessness, particularly if they've gotten to a point where they're now completely dependent on you when they maybe were independent at some point or partially independent at some point to now they totally need you. So, and this is where some of that resentment can come from, and you can see the care recipient being very frustrated and agitated and irritated with their caregiver because of things that they're going through that might be related to depression, anxiety. And of course, again, if you've got high cholesterol, you've got diabetes, right? There's some cardiac issues that develop over time, and a person just gets kind of tired of feeling like their body is failing them. And so, what happens when I want to give up, right? When I don't want to be a burden anymore, and trying to navigate all of those things can be very difficult. And I think it's just also very difficult to see your loved one declining before your eyes. It is quite a challenge to go from growing up with a parent who bathed you, who took care of you, to now you're taking care of them, and wanting them to have dignity and respect, and you also wanting to be able to have that boundary. And sometimes there's a challenge being able to navigate that. And then what happens when we don't have the financial resources to be able to get some of the support that we could benefit from? What if we don't have the capacity to be able to get the home adjusted so it's handicap accessible? Um, what if we don't have the resources to pay for a caregiver for the amount of time we need a caregiver? What if we're not in a position where anybody can stay with them overnight, right? And so just navigating all of these things can be very difficult. Or what happens when we didn't realize what was going on with this person until now all of a sudden the house is in foreclosure, or they've set something on fire, or they've wandered out and something has happened to them, right? And then we're realizing this is an issue when we didn't know it was. And so now we're in the thick of it and we don't have the resources. That's where that caregiving stress can come from. And particularly during the holidays, because here's the thing, caregiving doesn't really respect holidays. It doesn't care that this is an opportunity for you to celebrate with family, or that you were looking forward to some particular traditions, or that you had expectations of how the year was going to go. So this could present itself right at a time when you had no idea it was coming, and then being able to just adjust, right? So let's kind of talk about some of the holiday tips. First off, you know that I could not do an episode without getting that plug for therapy. And I definitely encourage people to utilize therapy as a caregiver for several reasons. One, you need to assess what you can manage, because I think what ultimately ends up contributing significantly to stress is that we take on things we're not prepared to be able to handle. And so we're making decisions out of feelings of obligation or guilt, and we're not making decisions based on what's best for us or what's best for the caregiver. So it's important for us to be able to talk that through in a safe space with someone who's just going to allow us to be able to process, not that family member who is going to have their input and create a dynamic where you again feel responsible, but just being able to make the best decision that you can make with the information that you have, right? So therapy provides that safe space. But also being able to identify triggers for stress, because as we discussed, people tend to have a lot of opinions when it comes to caregiving, even though they may not be offering any financial resources, any physical support resources, helping with the day-to-day management, especially when people don't live in the area, but they want to be able to have some input. I see this a lot when it comes to siblings and when it comes to children of the care recipient, right? And so we're going back and forth about, well, you want to have some input because you want to feel like you're helping in some way, but you live, hundreds of miles away, and so you can't actually be here in the day to day. So you want to, give recommendations and try to control things from where you are, right? So that can cause a lot of distress among siblings. So being able to identify some of these things and get a plan in place. Do I need some extra help for the holidays? Do I want to allow this other um, person who's interested in being able to participate in the caregiving experience to come on over here. Hey, you come over here. I'll leave. I get a respite. You go ahead and take over, right? Because maybe we don't do well together in the house, but maybe you do fine when you're with a care recipient by yourself. Um, Being able to know what the caregiver resources are. There are area agencies of aging or something similar in communities. Might be there's a Alzheimer's Caregiving Trusted Source, the Veterans Association Caregiver Support Line, the National Cancer Institute's Caring for the Caregiver. There is the Family Caregiver Alliance. There's the National Family Caregiver Support Program. So there are a lot of different options. It just depends on where you live and what's available. Also finding a caregiver support group so that you have other caregivers who you're talking to who may be able to share with you some of the things that they've learned. As we talked about before, being able to navigate the healthcare system. Inevitably, during the holidays is when a person may end up needing to go to a hospital or need some kind of support service. There may be a crisis. A lot of different things can happen because, again, more people may be around. There may be stress associated with the holidays for care recipients. They might be widowed, and so it can be a very difficult time of year for them. They may have lost children, um, siblings, and so all of the things that they could potentially be going through. Also being depressed that maybe they're not able to do all of the things that they usually are able to do for the holidays. So it may not feel like a really good time for them. And so making sure that you have other people who you're talking to who may be able to tell you, like, hey, here are some of the ways we navigated that, that also understand that experience can be very beneficial. I cannot say enough how important it is to have good self care in place. We talk about the triggers for your care recipient, but also triggers for you, and also the things that you tend to find yourself getting overindulged in. One of the things that happens, particularly when we feel a sense of guilt, obligation, or any kind of strong emotion that we may perceive as negative. You know, I don't believe in negative emotions. But what happens is they have a negative effect on us. And so oftentimes when that happens, we tend to ramp up our caregiving efforts and be really other focused as opposed to really looking inward and asking ourselves what we need. And so it's very important for you to identify the ways that you can take care of yourself, how you can get those breaks. And I hear a lot of people say they don't feel like they can get those breaks because they don't have anyone to help if they're not doing it, or that care recipient doesn't want anyone else to come in the home and caregive for them. Those are the two biggest barriers I see. And I will tell you that if you do not get help and support, you are going to be in a position where you're going to be the care recipient because that is when your health is going to be most compromised. We've talked about before the effects of long-term stress on the body. You cannot have that stress hormone, cortisol, in your body indefinitely. So there has to be those times to take breaks. And it's very important to understand that you taking that break also can be giving your care recipient what they need too, because sometimes people are able to receive support in different ways from somebody that's not their family member, because they, again, want to have some dignity, want to have some respect, want to be able to be seen in a different way. And sometimes it can be very disappointing for them when they feel like their loved one is taking care of them. So there's a lot of different reasons why getting that extra support and help can be very beneficial for you. It also can give people an opportunity to have some social engagement with other people. And I know it can be challenging to navigate finding the right care support resource. But again, having that support of that caregiver support group or some of the care resources that we talked about allows you to be able to figure out who's the best fit for you. I think it's also really important for us to focus on what is meaningful about the holidays, right? So sometimes we get so caught up in the traditions, and when we can't do the traditions, we feel like it ruins the holidays. Well, if I can't do what I want to do, I'm not going to do what I can do. I encourage you to be flexible, and I also encourage you to really think about what you want to gain from that experience. Is it about us celebrating together, sharing memories, looking at pictures? Are there some things that we might want to add, some things that we want to do different and we want to adjust because we recognize we have to have different dietary restrictions that might be in place, right? So this care recipient may not be able to eat in the same ways that they were able to eat last holiday, or at least they don't need to be doing so, whether or not they might make that request, right? Might have to do smaller things, scale it back, keep it simple. It doesn't have to be so extravagant. And that allows you also to be able to have that good self-care because it allows you to be able to identify what your boundaries are going to be. And sometimes we're in positions where our loved ones are in a space where they really need more rest and they don't necessarily need all that constant engagement going on, and neither do you. And depending on what they have going on, if they are really vulnerable to potentially getting ill, we don't want to be bringing all of those things around them. We may be able to set up some video kind of engagements so that they'll be able to engage with family members without putting themselves at risk or without having to try to navigate getting people in and out of spaces in ways that could just cause more damage to them. It's not necessarily the right time to be doing that in their lives, or it may not be that they're able to do that anymore, right? And so we may also have people come over and we'll have them come over in intervals. So maybe it isn't that everybody comes over Christmas Day. Maybe we'll have people come over through the course of a week. And it might be a person a day or a couple of people a day. We might stagger those times and maneuver them around meal times and nap times. Or maybe we want to be able to have people there at a particular time where the person is usually most alert. Some people are more alert during the daytime. As the day progresses, they don't necessarily have that much energy or maybe that much mental clarity. And so being able to have people over there might be beneficial. For some people, it's the evening time where they tend to come alive and they're more engaged. So you may want to have people over there. Maybe they tend to be up at night. So maybe you want to have people over there with them during the evening hours. We also want to be very thoughtful of asking for things that we need. In this season where we do like to give gifts, it is absolutely okay for you to ask for gifts that are going to be able to be consistent with your efforts to be a caregiver, that are efficient, things that you can actually use, things that you may need that are going to give you more balance, respite, and support. People may give you some coupons for caregiving hours, and so you're able to get out and go and do things because they'll come over and they'll sit with your loved one. It may be things that your care recipient may need. Maybe they have adult diapers that they utilize, or the pads that go underneath them. It may be that they need some blankets. It may be that they're constantly cold. They go through socks and underwear, right? So things that can offset some of the expenses that you may have. You're wiping them up, washing them up with some of those cleansing cloths that already come with the soap in it, and you just got to add a little water, right? And so some of these things may be things that you can benefit from. Maybe they need some more Ensure. Maybe they need some more vitamin water. So thinking about those kind of things, and that it is absolutely appropriate and in necessary, I will say absolutely necessary, for you to ask for help, because I know a lot of times we have difficulty asking people for help. We don't want to be a burden. This is my responsibility. Sometimes we cheat people out of an opportunity to be a blessing to us, who want to give, who want to support us, who want to be there in the ways that they can. And one of those ways is to gift us things. Maybe meals that they're gifting you with. It may be like, hey, I'll come over and do some different activities with them. It may be I'll come over and help you get them dressed, do their grooming. I can give you some styles that will allow them to be able to maintain their hair so you don't have to do it every day. Or it may be that, hey, I'll come over, I'll shave them, right? So there are a lot of different ways that people can show up and be supportive of you if you will give them that opportunity. All right, so again, at my ending points, what I want you all to remember is sometimes we take better care of other people than we do ourselves. Caregiving starts at home, and that's not with the care recipient, it's with you. So take good care of you and be well.